Do you need an introduction?
No.
We welcome back Janet Lewis, who's been here before and shared with us, and now she has a new role with GBGM, and she'll tell you all about it. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, it's always good to be back in places that I've been before, because then it feels like you're coming home. Anyway, I'm going to jump right into the PowerPoint presentation. The beginning of this will be since nobody's been there before, and you may not have an idea of what the lay of the land looks like. I'm going to start with some of the typical holy site type visits to give you a little flavor of what folks see. And then we'll jump into the part that most tourists don't see. So this is the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth. It's only the front end of the church. There's a great big, looks like a giant oil can that sticks up on the Basilica of the Annunciation. This is where the angel Gabriel, well, this is a church that some people believe the angel Gabriel came and visited Mary to tell her that she was going to have a son. The Son of God, in fact. Now there's an Orthodox church just up the way. They believe that the angel Gabriel did not come to visit Mary in Joseph's home, but when she was getting water at the well. So there's a Greek Orthodox church built over the site of, it's still running, it's an artesian well, comes out of the ground. It's still very cold, very fresh, you can drink the water still. And that's the only source of water in Nazareth. So if that's the story you believe, then that is the location of the place. Only 3 places in the Holy Land where they can actually document. You need the oral tradition, the written evidence, and the archaeological evidence to pinpoint a place. And the St. Gabriel's, not this church, not the Basilica, but the smaller Orthodox Church of St. Gabriel's is built over the well. Is one of those 3. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem is the second one. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre or the Church of the Resurrection, same place, depending on if you're Muslim or Christian, then that would be the 3rd location. Does it take a while? I'm not aiming it. Oh, there we go. This is the chapel of the Mount of the Beatitudes, where Jesus supposedly preached the Sermon on the Mount. You can maybe in the background see a little bit of the Sea of Galilee there. Now this little hill, it's not a big mountain, it's a little hill and it's actually below sea level. So it's not, some people portray the Sermon on the Mount as Jesus standing on the top of this big mountain and all these people around. Most likely, because there's a natural bowl in the side of the hill, he probably would have been standing on the shore of the lake, and the people would have been sitting in this natural amphitheater so that the wind coming off the lake would carry his voice up to the people on the hill. That's another view of the Sea of Galilee. It's the Golan Heights in the background. That's the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. That Israel occupied in 1967. This is a really nice sculpture at a place called the Primacy of St. Peter, where it's right on the water, and there's a big stone there where Jesus gathered his disciples. It's a big stone, at the side of the hill. Where Jesus gathered the disciples and told Peter, well, he asked them, who do you think, who do you say that I am? And then he told Peter, you are the rock, you will be the foundation for my church, and go out into the world, etc. So this is Jesus basically commissioning Peter. And for missionaries, this is one of the places that we take missionaries to remember their commissioning to go out into the world and serve the Lord. This is this is a road sign in the Jordan Valley. You see, this is part of the Judean desert. It's very desert-like. especially in the summertime. And it's the lowest point on Earth. It's about 3,000 feet below sea level at this point. And this actually was taken, I took this picture just near Jericho. When they put these up about a week after I almost hit about 7 camels walking across the road. But then the Israelis got all upset by that, so they took them down and put pictures of deer instead.
Oh, really?
Watch out for the deer crossing. But it's actually a camel. It came out all with fuzzy green lines. This is the Jordan River. You can see how small it is.
Yes.
It's very small. This particular incident, we were at, this is on the Jordanian side actually. It was before, because on the Israeli side it was a closed military zone. Nobody was allowed down there. It's all considered quote unquote frontier with the border of Jordan. The Jordan River is supposed to be the border between Jordan and the West Bank and Israel. So you're not allowed to even get close to the Jordan River on the Israeli side. It's all a closed military zone. This was taken in '96 when Jordan and Israel signed a peace agreement. The people on the Jordanian side were able to have access to the location where they believe John the Baptist baptized Jesus, in the Jordan River. It actually wasn't in the Jordan River. There's an estuary that comes off the river and it creates this little pool. And they believe that's where, because one of the earliest churches that mark the site is in that location. And it's in a floodplain, so when the water is high after the snow melts in the north, then it fills this pool and it's a nice place to, it'd be a good place for baptism anyway. But just so you can see just how narrow the Jordan River is, they say more ink has been spilled to write about the Jordan River than there is water in the river. Another picture, this is actually the Mount of Temptation in the background. It's got kind of a flat, that's actually a wall at the top, and you can't really, do we know why this has got green lines on it?
I don't know why.
Huh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, we'll just deal with it. Anyway, this is in Jericho. Jericho is called the City of Palms, and this photo is actually taken from Tel Jericho, the ancient city that, remember when Joshua came across the river and slaughtered everybody in Jericho? That would have been, see where it's got like an archaeological sign there on the left. This is a tell, or a small man-made mountain that the city would have been built in and around the ancient city of Jericho. Jericho is over 10,000 years old. They say it's the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. The Mount of Temptations, the place where Jesus actually, so they say, these are all very traditional sites, with those 3 exceptions, is about halfway down that mountain. And there's a grotto there, a cave, where people believe that Jesus went into the cave to pray and fast and in the middle of the desert. Jericho actually has lots and lots of freshwater springs, so it's a big oasis in the middle of the Judean desert. So from this cave on the side of that mountain, you can actually look down on this very lush city, and he would have been really tempted, because it gets to be about 140 degrees down there in the summertime. It's very hot. So to go without water and food, would have obviously been a life-threatening challenge. This is the old city, the old and new city of Jerusalem, taken from the Mount of Olives. You see the Haram al-Sharif, or the noble sanctuary for the Muslims in the front, with the Dome of the Rock, where Abraham stood, was going to slaughter his son Isaac, and then God provided the ram that's inside that Golden Dome area. The actual mosque area is over here. Al-Aqsa Mosque this is the back side of it. It kind of goes this direction. And it has a gray dome. That's the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. Here, towards the center, I can get this thing to point right, yeah, right there. See these two gray domes here? That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which was actually outside the old city during Jesus' time. The walls of the old city curved around and made sort of a cutout. And the main entrance into the city was in that area where obviously all the people who were being punished, either being crucified upside down, right side up, just tied to the crosses or whatever, as a warning to people coming into the city. If you misbehave, this is what will happen to you, kind of thing. So that's where the hill of Golgotha is located. It's actually, they built this church, which is divided between many, many different denominations, over the site of Golgotha and the site where they put the cross. And you can go downstairs underneath and see where the earthquake shook the land and it ripped the curtain in the temple, and there's a crack in the stone under where the cross was. And then the tomb area is actually inside that church as well. It was just right around the corner practically. So it's all contained in that one area. The Via Dolorosa, or the way of suffering that a lot of people take, starts, let me go back. Here we go. Anyway, it starts to the right of the picture at St. Stephen's Gate with the Fortress Antonia, where they actually, after they arrested Jesus on the Mount of Olives in the Garden of Gethsemane, they took him across the valley, threw him in a cistern to hold him as a prisoner, with a guard and everything. And then they took him to the Fortress Antonia, which is just, where's the little thing here? There, see it on the wall? Okay, just about here is the St. Stephen's Gate, and over here would be the Fortress Antonia. And the remains of that are down below ground level now, because when you destroy a city, you don't remove all the rubble, you just build on top of the rubble. So it's kind of like Rome has got several layers of construction of Jerusalem. So when most tour groups travel, they say, oh, we're going to go to Israel. We're going to take the whole trip to the Holy Land, and we're going to visit Israel. And this is what they think they're going to visit. This is actually the map off the Israeli government website, and only Israel recognizes this map. No other country in the world recognizes that Israel includes the Golan Heights, this area right here, which is occupied Syria. It doesn't agree that that this Gaza Strip, which is right here, is part of Israel, and they don't agree that the West Bank, which is right here, kind of a kidney shape. So the West Bank is the Jordan River, and it's on the west side of the Jordan River, or the west bank of the Jordan River, and that also is included as part of Israel on the Israeli map, because they believe they conquered these areas. They didn't just occupy them. However, the international community believes that they did conquer them, or they did occupy them. So on everybody else's map, it looks like this.
Wow.
Shall I review, or can you remember the first one? Basically, here's the Golan Heights, which is this part right here. That's occupied Golan Heights, that's Syria. Here's the West Bank, which was occupied in 1967 in the Six-Day War, and this is the Gaza Strip, which had been administered by Egypt. This is all Egypt right here. This is the Sinai Peninsula. And the Gaza Strip was a little tag that was administered by Egypt. Before 1967, this is what the area of the West Bank, I lost my little thing here. There we go. This kidney shape was called the Transjordan because it went across the Jordan River. So, and it was administered by Jordan. So even today you can still pay for things in Bethlehem with Jordanian dinar because Bethlehem's in the West Bank. Now, in 1948, Israel declared itself a state on the land of Palestine, in an area that was actually very similar to this area, not the first map that I showed you. That came after 1967. But in 1948, they declared themselves a state on pretty close to what you see here. This is historic Palestine that you see on the left. They had a newspaper, they had a monetary system, they had a civil society in the traditional way, not the way we have elected officials, but they had muhtars, who were the oldest person, the oldest and wisest person in the village would make the decisions on, what was right and what was wrong and that kind of thing. Now, the green area was Palestinian, and approximately 5% of the land was owned by the Jews. Now, these were called Palestinian Jews. They lived in Palestine. They spoke Arabic, not Hebrew. The new Hebrew is a new language that was developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, based on the ancient Hebrew, but including Eastern European languages like Yiddish and some other things that people were already familiar in hearing. But these particular Jews lived, amongst the Palestinians, so they spoke Arabic. Now, with the influx of Jews starting in the 1800s, with the Zionist movement and the idea that, actually it began in England with a man named Lord Shaftesbury, who said, these Jews are taking over our economy, we need to get them out of England, we need to find them a place to live. Put all the Jews there so they don't control our economy, Very colonialist thinking, it was the colonialism era. So that idea was actually picked up by a gentleman named Theodor Herzl, who was called the father of Zionism. He was a secular Jew, he wasn't a religious Jew. But he did believe that it would be good if the Jews had a place where they could call home, where they would feel comfortable among their, other Jews. They wouldn't be persecuted, et cetera, et cetera. So he went to Uganda, and he thought, well, he was looking for land that had a small population. And Uganda fit the bill. So he went to Uganda, or he thought of Uganda. They discussed this in the first Zionist conference in Basel, Switzerland, in like 1889 or somewhere around in there. And they were discussing countries where they thought they could create the new Israel. The Ugandans weren't real happy about that, so they didn't go there. Then they went to Morocco, which had a large Jewish population already. And they went to discuss, we want to create a Jewish homeland for the Jews. And the king of Morocco said, well, I'm sorry, you came to the wrong place. We don't have any Jews here. We only have Moroccans. And during the Second World War, in fact, the king of Morocco refused to make the Jews put the yellow star on their shoulders like they did in other places around Europe and North Africa. So anyway, with this influx of the early Jewish community from a variety of countries, mainly from Eastern Europe, beginning to settle in the land of Palestine, it was creating a lot of conflict, not only among the Palestinians who lived there, but among the other Arab countries who didn't like these Jews coming into the region. Their culture was different, their habits were different. So there was a lot of conflict going on. So the United Nations proposed a way to split the area between the two countries, or the two peoples. And it gave over 50% of the land of Palestine to the Jews who really only owned 5%. So this didn't fly. The important thing that they did propose was that Jerusalem, it doesn't show on this map, but Jerusalem, which is right there, would be a corpus separatum. It would be a yellow dot incorporating Jerusalem as a separate body administered by a third party, not by the Jews, not by the Palestinians. And that, unfortunately, should have taken place, because then it would make sure that Jerusalem is kept as an open city for all people. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. That's still on the books today. The decision in the Oslo Agreement was to keep the discussion of what to do about Jerusalem to the very end of the process, the peace process, which was supposed to end in 1998. That process has came to a screeching halt and hasn't ever really proceeded. So instead, it declared itself on a state on this third map here. You see, it was very similar to the first one I showed you, and to the internationally recognized map of Israel. Israel does not have a constitution. It's never declared its borders. It only has boundaries. If you declare your borders, you're bound by your borders. And Haretz Israel, the great land of Israel, in the Zionist plan, is everything from the Nile River in Jordan to the Euphrates River in Iraq. Wow. That's the great land of Israel. Wow. That's a huge piece of real estate. Wow. Anyway, as part of the Oslo discussions, the Palestinian land of the West Bank was divided into, here you see what's left, into areas A, B, and C. This shows areas A and B. Area A is basically the 7 major cities, places like Bethlehem, let's see if I can point to it with my hand shaking. That's Bethlehem right there, Jericho, Hebron down here, Ramallah just north of Jerusalem, Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarm, Qalqilia. They're basically 7 large cities where the Palestinian population is concentrated. As I mentioned, it's mainly an agricultural community. So area A is under full Palestinian authority, both civil and security. There is a police force, a Palestinian police force now. Area B is under Palestinian civil authority, but Israeli security. So this map is a little bit deceiving because it looks like it gives the Palestinians a lot more control over land that they really aren't in control of. Politically, they, in the villages, and this is mainly agricultural land with some villages in it. For example, the village of Wadi Hakim. Some of you may be familiar with that village. That's in area B and C. The town is in area B, the agricultural land is in area C, which is the rest of the white area that you see in the map there, which is under full Israeli control. That's where the Jewish settlements are going in, that's where the Jewish-only bypass roads are built. Here, this is a better illustration. You can see that the dark green areas are the cities, and here's Jericho over here along the Jordan Valley. This is what I was mentioning before. This whole area is a closed military zone for the Palestinians. Now, it was declared a closed military zone by the Israeli government. What that means, it's a no-build area. However, this is where, and it's also a no-grazing area. You're not even supposed to graze your sheep down there. However, this is the area where a lot of the Jewish settlements are being built now, because there's no Palestinians, or very few Palestinians in this region. So the light green is area B, that's what I was explaining before, and then all of the dark brown would be area C, which is under full Israeli control. Now you notice these squiggly lines here, these are bypass roads. And you'll notice that they don't pass between the green areas, they go around them. These are Jewish-only roads. You have to have a yellow license plate to drive on these roads. The Palestinians and the Israelis have different colored license plates. And they're built on confiscated Palestinian land. They take up actually more land space than the Israeli settlements do, because they're like big freeways. Plus, if they go right through your olive grove, you've lost all access to your olive grove. You can't pick anything within 50 meters of either side of this road. Plus, you can't even walk across these roads. So if your olive grove is on one side and your house is on the other, you've lost all your income because it's on the other side of this highway that you're not allowed to cross. So this is one of the reasons that the international community is very important in being in the region, because we do the picking for them. We're allowed in those areas. These are some scriptural references I'll go through pretty quickly. You probably recognize this one. The picture on the right is a D9 Caterpillar bulldozer. This is obviously an act of nonviolent resistance. This man's about to have his olive grove uprooted. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of olive trees and fruit trees have been uprooted to make room for not only the settlements, but these bypass roads, and now the route of the separation wall. This is one of the companies that we tried to pass a resolution to force the Board of Pensions to divest from, because we have United Methodist money invested in Caterpillar, Hewlett-Packard, and Motorola Solutions. All three of these companies' equipment is being used to oppress another people. And in cases of the D9 bulldozers, what we call weapons of mass destruction, one of these bulldozers ran over a young woman named Rachel Corey, who's in Washington, she's on the West Coast here. She was in a reflective vest with a bullhorn, shouting at the driver, standing in front of a house that he was about to demolish. And he ran over her and then backed up over her again, and she was killed. These are specially outfitted. It's not that Caterpillar equipment is bad equipment. You know, even the Palestinians use it for certain cases. But when you outfit it to be armor-plated and attach machine guns to it, then it makes it a weapon, a killer. And that's why we requested that the Board of Pensions, we tried to pass the resolution at General Conference to have the Board of Pensions divest from these three companies that we've been engaged in corporate discussions with for over 10 years, and they still haven't changed their policies, so it's time to get our Methodist money out of these companies and put it somewhere else. So when this comes up in your conference, we hope your delegates to General Conference next time, because we're still pushing for 2016. Last Friday night, is today Saturday? Yeah, not yesterday, but a week ago yesterday, the Presbyterian Church did vote to divest from those three companies, because we've been in this together with the Presbyterian. Okay.
What? Is it over?
There we go. Maybe I just didn't squish it right now. Okay, this is a picture of the separation wall. Now you notice, and this happens to be on the Mount of Olives, the backside of the Mount of Olives. Look at these olive trees here, this olive grove, and these Palestinian houses here, and this lovely little wall that's about 30 feet high that goes right between the two. The Palestinians have lost all access to the agricultural land on the other side of the wall because there's no way for them to get across that wall.
Is it concrete?
It's concrete, yeah. Yeah. In addition, this is another location because it's so close, it is on the Mount of Olives, and the Orthodox Jews in particular want to be buried in as close to the Mount of Olives as possible because they believe that's where the Messiah will come and release all the dead from their graves. Very biblical, we have that in our Bible. So they all want to be buried there or live as close to that area as possible. So a new Jewish-only settlement will be built on that land. Okay, I'm not getting the hang of this thing. Should I just hold it down until it switches? I don't want it to go racing through. New batteries? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the wall. Oh, here we go. Well, we'll stop here. Should I keep going, or are you doing something right there?
Let me tell you what
She can't hear you. What did you say?
Just tell me when to go forward to doctor results.
Oh,
Oh, tell you what, it just went forward one. Oh, just tell you and you'll do it like by hand? Oh, okay, that'll work. Let me see if it's one with that. Nope, okay. Okay. This is scriptural, so you can kind of go through this. Oh, you're not gonna hit the go button?
See if it works.
Okay.
Okay, I'll help you out.
Thank you. I can probably do it myself.
We're gonna go
On the screen. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. One more. You recognize that scripture? Next. Next. Oh, okay. Stop here for a second. Now, the Palestinians say, you know, Israel decided that it needed this security barrier, as they call it in English. In Hebrew, they use the word hafradah, which if you take the word apartheid and translate it into Hebrew, you get hafradah. So it's a separation barrier. But it's not even that. If it was a separation barrier to separate the Israeli Jews from the Palestinians, then it would not go right down the middle of Manger Street in Bethlehem, separating Palestinians from Palestinians. It wouldn't go down the middle of the road in Beit Hanina, separating Palestinians from Palestinians. It wouldn't cross right over the top of the Mount of Olives, separating Palestinians from Palestinians. What it does is it separates all the good land and the water from the Palestinians. So if you look at this map, here's the green line, it's green. This is the armistice line, the border or the boundary of Israel. Remember on the map with a kidney shape? And Jerusalem was right in that center of the kidney. And the green line follows that kidney shape. Here, you can see it pretty clearly. It kind of goes down like that. The wall, the root of the wall, is shown in black and red. So you see how far into the West Bank the root of the wall goes. Way out here, almost to the Jordan Valley, all the way up here, all the way down here. Here's Bethlehem. It cuts Bethlehem and Jerusalem. It severs them. From the old city of Jerusalem, which is right here, this is where all a lot of the holy sites are. The Mount of Olives is just here. And the old city of Bethlehem is 6 miles. It's very close. It's walking distance. So it cuts off Bethlehem from Jerusalem, which has always been one and connected entity. That road is like an umbilical cord between the two. In addition, it's all of these blue areas. This is all Israeli housing, Jewish-only housing. So obviously the wall was not meant for security. It was meant to confiscate all this additional land and absorb it into Israel, to become part of Israel, a de facto border, basically. Okay, next. 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 This is the Al-Khalil, or Hebron. Al-Khalil in Arabic means the one who is a friend of God. This is the city of Abraham. This is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their wives are buried in the Ibrahimi Mosque. And Hebron has been a divided city now. You can see where, oops, sorry. This door here has been welded shut. These doors have been welded shut. These are the storefronts. These are people's shops that have been welded closed by the Israeli army. Razor wire has been put across their roads in order to prevent them access. Now the problem is, see for example this one, the people live upstairs. This is how they enter their home, is through their shop doors. Well, when your shop door is welded closed, how do you get in or out of your house? You have to climb up onto a roof, out a window, across somebody else's rooftop. This is how they have to get in and out of their houses now. The reason they did this was because, first of all, they wanted to take control of the old city of Hebron. You can go to the next slide. In order to, they settlers, Jewish-only settlers. These are what we call ideological settlers, the most violent and rabid zealots you could ever meet. Who they don't work. Their sole job is to harass the Palestinians to get them to leave, because God gave them this land and everybody else needs to get out. So they have 5 settlements in the heart of the old city of Hebron amongst 150,000 Palestinians, with a population of about 400 divided between 5 settlements. So it's a very small Jewish population with between 2,000 and 3,000 Israeli soldiers to protect them. And one of the ways they protect them is by dividing the city and closing off the heart of the city to the Palestinians by welding their storefronts shut. The main market area, people from Bethlehem, from all over, used to go to Hebron to shop, because they're known for being very good entrepreneurs, great salespeople. You get really good deals in Hebron, etc. A huge market area. It's completely dead now. It's all welded closed. Next, harassment. Obviously, I mentioned that. Next, again, the separation wall. You can see there are guard towers in it. This is on the Palestinian side. Now, on the Israeli side, that earth wall would be banked all the way up to about within like a meter from the top of the wall. And then lots of plants and flowers would have been planted on it. So they think the wall is only this high, when actually it's like 30 feet. Next. This is just outside of Bethlehem. Next. These are what we call bypass roads, usually bypass roads. This is the way you get to Wadi Fukin. This bypass road, can you go back to that other picture for a second, please? Yeah. This is what we call the tunnel road, as you get going into the tunnel. It's a freeway. It's a beautiful freeway. It cuts right through Palestinian land. In this area, it's not necessarily agricultural, but there, in many of the areas on these steep hillsides, they're terraced and for olive groves. Okay, next. So here's the bypass road at the top, obviously. Nice, beautiful highway here. But because the Palestinians can't drive on this road, to get this would goes to, there's a turnoff that you can take up the hill and go into Bethlehem. Except that now the Israelis are not allowed into Bethlehem. It's against Israeli law for them to enter Bethlehem. So that road's cut off. But the Palestinians aren't allowed to use this nice road anyway. But if they want to go to Bethlehem, and since they can't cross the road on foot, they have to dig a tunnel, and this is how their cars have to drive up this dirt road and come up the hill under this highway, and then proceed on into their towns and villages. Next, that's how we used to get to Wadi Fukin. Here's an example of the 2 different color license plates. This is in Bethlehem. I had an Israeli car, so I had a yellow plate, but I lived in Bethlehem, so I could drive my car into Bethlehem. The Palestinians with the white plates cannot drive their cars out of Bethlehem or out of the West Bank or on all of those crisscrossing bypass roads that you saw on the map. They are, and most of their roads are closed by roadblocks, either big trenches that they dig in the road, or big dirt mounds, or big cubic meter concrete blocks across the road. So they can go so far, and then they either have to turn back, or they leave their car and walk the rest of the way, or they get a taxi on the other side. It's very, getting from one place to another is extremely difficult now. There are over 600 checkpoints throughout the West Bank. That's not road closures, that's just checkpoints. Next, where a soldier, actually stops you. Again, the root of the wall, this is, you can see how high it is in the picture on the right. And the picture on the left is to illustrate that it's not about security, it's about land confiscation. The houses on the right that you see there have lost all access to their land on the left. And they come right up to the sides of the houses. It's not, they don't care how much it costs to build that wall. If they did, it would go in a straight line. It's over $1 million a kilometer. built that wall. Next. This is Manger Street. This was the historic route from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And that big old metal gate there is only open 3 times a year for the patriarchs to process on Christmas Eve from Jerusalem to Nativity Church to pray at the church. That's the only time the Israelis open this door again. Now, I don't know if you can see, but right here is a lady standing next to that wall. That's how big the wall is. And there's a guy, you can see the guy, the guard, looking out of the window over there. They have 24-hour guards in there. Here's the other half. Oops, lost it. There we go. This is the other half of Manger Street. It used to continue, I mean, this is one half, and then the other half used to continue, and then, but the wall cuts out, then goes this way, and then cuts this way again. So the other end of the street is also blocked farther down the road. So all of these businesses here, they've lost, and all along the route of the route between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, all of the businesses were gone. They're lost. Next. This is Alex and Brenda Awa, 2 of the other Methodist missionaries. He's Palestinian. He was in the United States, went to seminary, met his wife, Brenda, who's American. Was in the country for about, for seminary, a couple of years in school. And wanted to go back, and they wouldn't let him into his own country anymore. Sorry, you've been gone too long, you've lost your residency rights. His family's born, all his brothers and sisters born and raised in Jerusalem, right outside the old city, right across from Damascus Gate. Their father was actually killed in the gunfire in 1948 between all these warring people. And so he got stuck in the United States for about 7 years until the Methodist Church finally said, all right, we will send you back as a Methodist missionary. He's a Baptist pastor. He's the pastor of the East Jerusalem Baptist Church now. He's there on a 1-year clergy visa, which he has to renew every year. And that whole visa process is extremely long and excruciating. I can tell you firsthand on that one. Oh, next. I mentioned checkpoints, over 600 of them in the West Bank. Next. This is an example of one. Actually, this is at the very top of the Bethlehem checkpoint. You can see the 2 doors that actually go through the wall and the guard tower at the end. And just on the other side of the guard tower, you see the opening here. This metal gate is open, and this is where the tour buses come through. Now, since this was built, and this was brand new when they built this. This picture was taken, they had just built this. It's several years old now, and they have, I don't think I have a line of where people have to line up. It goes down a hill, so when the tour buses go by, they don't see the thousands of Palestinians that are lined up. They begin to line up about 3 o'clock in the morning because the process to get through here is so long and tedious, and they want to work for the day. Now keep in mind, first you have to have a military permit, and you have to pay money to apply for that permit. And that permit is only good for 3 months. Now, if you don't have a job, that permit cost is extremely high for you. If they suddenly say, no, sorry, there's been an incident, we're closing the checkpoints today, you still can't get out. So any kind of chance of having a job on the other side in Jerusalem has just gone right out the window. So they start lining up. They give about between 2,000 and 3,000 permits to the young men. You have to be over 27 and usually married with children because you're less likely to be a suicide risk, et cetera, et cetera. Even though we haven't had suicide bombings since a long time ago, the late 1990s, into 2000 I think was the last one. So then you walk through this door, there's a booth on the other side with someone behind, bulletproof glass. You show that you have some documentation. They don't look at it, you just show that you have something. First you have to go wait for the light to turn green. There's a turnstile there, 7 feet high. You have to wait for the light to turn green. Then they let maybe 3 people through, and then it turns red again, you have to wait longer. So then you show your documentation, then you walk across a parking lot and down another area that we call the cattle chute, and into the terminal where you wait for another turnstile to turn green. Then you have a conveyor belt, you put everything on the conveyor belt, you walk through the metal detector, you show that you have documentation again, then you walk through, you have to wait for another turnstile to turn green. Then you have a biometric scan. You come up to another turnstile, but this is like going into the grocery store type of turnstile, you know. The little, these kind, not these kind. And you put your hand on this machine, which is made by Hewlett-Packard, which is one of the reasons that that's on the boycott list, or the divestment list, and it scans your hand, the information pops up on the computer in another booth. Meanwhile, above you, they're patrolling on catwalks. And they're, you know, shouting at you in Hebrew, and it's like, I don't understand you, you know? If you pass that far, then you can proceed into Jerusalem to what we call the slave market, where, you know, the guys just stand around with all their tools. They take their tools with them every single day, hoping that somebody will come by in a truck and say, okay, you, and you. They climb in the back of the truck and they get work for the day. And it's obviously low wages, but it's the only kind of work they can find, with the exception of construction on the wall or construction of the Jewish-only settlements that are confiscating their land and putting their lives at risk. Next. This is the cattle chute with no people in it. Heading into the terminal, you see it comes down on the left and you turn and then go down. This is bumper to bumper bodies in the morning when people are trying to get out to go to work. Next. That's a good example. That's going back into Bethlehem. They have to go through the same process. Now they've eased it up a little bit. This is at the end of the day. If you have to start lining up at 3 in the morning and you don't get off work until, well, most people stop work at 4 over there. But then you have to get transportation back, which also costs you money, and then you wait in line just to get back into Bethlehem. The majority of your day is spent standing in line, you know, waiting. Next. In the rural areas, this is what a checkpoint looks like. They make them line up. Now, here's an interesting thing. The orange permit here, this gentleman is looking at an orange permit. That's a West Bank permit. This guy is holding up a green one. I don't know if you can tell the picture, but that's a green permit. That means he lives in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, you are not a West Banker, and you're not a citizen of Israel. You are only a Jerusalemite. So you have a whole different status. You can't travel, because if you're not an Israeli, you don't qualify for an Israeli passport. If you're not a West Banker, you don't qualify for a Palestinian passport, or you give up any rights to living in Jerusalem. So they have to travel on a laissez-passer, a travel document. If your child is born in Jerusalem, how do you give them identification? How do you give them a birth certificate? Where were they born? They were born in Jerusalem. So kids are in like junior high now with no birth certificates. Next. This is, as you exit Bethlehem, this is what it looks like. I mentioned at the top of the hill, there was an opening in the wall, and this is what that looks like. If you're in a car, if you're an international or you have a Jerusalem ID, you're allowed to pass through this checkpoint. Everybody else, I can't take someone, a Palestinian, through this checkpoint in my car. He has to get out and wait in that line. And I will meet him on the other side. So, you know, I'll drive through and I'll pull out my book or my knitting and wait, because it's going to take him a long time. Next. Because the Palestinians are only allowed through that checkpoint. This is the Jericho checkpoint, where I used to go there every weekend and I would wait for 3 hours in this line. Next. Plus they have what we call flying checkpoints. This is where they will just suddenly set up a roadblock, or they'll throw the metal strips down and force you to stop. This is a public bus. The Palestinian buses are either green and white or blue and white, depending on if they're going north or south. This one's going north to Ramallah. And they will stop the bus and take everybody, go onto the bus, take everybody's ID, then get off the bus, call them all in. I mean, it's like, you can sit there. On Easter, they will collect even the passports, and they'll make you stand there. They'll just hold them in their hand. They don't even call them in. They know we're all going to church. So in Jerusalem, at, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And they'll just wait for a couple of hours until they think, well, church must be over right now. I can hear the church bells. And then they'll give you back all your permits. Exactly. It's pure harassment. Next. Okay, we're going to go through this next part pretty quickly because there's a lot and I don't want to run out of time. So just keep going. Thank you. Well, not that fast. Home demolitions. Why would they demolish your house? Now you see, a home is it's like a big apartment building because the Palestinians live with their extended families. All the sons live with their parents, with their wives, with their children. They all live in one big building. Now this particular family had some money. They were able to buy a permit. You have to pay for a permit, but you can also bribe certain people if you have enough money and get a permit or not. They usually only issue 2 to 3 a year for the Palestinian community. Now this would be in Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. This family decided, let's build a balcony. We want a balcony garden, a place to have some fresh air. So they built a balcony on their house and then got a demolition order for their house. And they said, but we have a permit for our house. We're just adding a balcony. No, you didn't get a permit for the balcony, so your house has to come down. So the next picture shows the house after it was demolished.
They didn't even just take down the balcony.
They took down the whole house. And then, to add insult to injury, they send you a bill for the demolition of your own home. Because somebody has to pay that bulldozer driver, and somebody has to pay the army to be there to protect that bulldozer driver, or the guy with the machine. Next. Oh, and some internationals there who were present to try to prevent the house demolition. Again, a D9 Caterpillar bulldozer, you can see the people in the front to get an idea of how huge these things are. They're as big as a house. And you can also tell how they've been fitted out and armor plated. They have these metal things that come down over the windows. And there's machine guns on the sides. Next. Okay, Jewish-only settlements, next. In this country, we have this image of, the covered wagons and the settlers coming across the plains and settling in the West. This is what a Jewish-only settlement looks like. This was in my neighborhood, actually. They come and they start with trailer parks, and they call it an outpost. This will be on the farthest fringes of where a permanent settlement will be. These things are plunked down, they put in the water, electricity, the infrastructure, and then a week later they just drop these things in by helicopter and they have a settlement in like a week. This happens to be Givat Hamatos, the settlement of Givat Hamatos. Next. You're looking actually towards the Mount Olive something. And this is what you end up with. This is Har Homa, right at the entrance to Bethlehem. It used to be a beautiful green forested hill. Next. This is Gilo. Next. Now, what happens in this picture, if you look way in the distance here, there's a settlement here, another settlement here, going down this hill, and this one in the front. This is what the Israeli prime ministers continue to call natural growth. Oh, we're not constructing new settlements, this is natural growth. No, it's a brand new settlement. They call it like Ma'ali Adumim, Kufar Adumim, different neighborhoods of the Adumim settlement, but they're completely different settlements. But what happens is then eventually they go in and fill in all this empty land in between creating what we call a settlement block, a huge area where, now keep in mind, this is on confiscated Palestinian land. The Palestinians cannot go into these areas, into the settlements, because they're what we call gated communities. They're surrounded by barbed wire and have armed guards. But also, in the case of Ma'ale Adumim, it starts in Jerusalem and goes all the way down to the Jordan Valley, effectively cutting the southern part of the West Bank from the northern part of the West Bank. Cutting Bethlehem off from Ramallah, which is the economic capital of the Palestinian community. Next. Next. Here's Wadi Fuqin. Now this is a good example of where the wall goes and how they do what they do and why. You see Wadi Fuqin on there. It's this tiny little, let's see, where's the brown? Here we go. All right, see it on the green thing here? This brown, that's Wadi Fuqin. The village is at the upper end of the valley, and then this is the agricultural land. This is here's the green line. That's the border, basically, between the armistice line between Israel on the white and the West Bank, the multicolored area. And then this black dot, here, let me find it here, right here. That's the Israeli town of Sur Hadassah. Wadi Fuqin and Sur Hadassah have been, since Sur Hadassah was built after 1948, they've been very good neighbors. Most of Wadi Fuqin's property they lost in 1948 when Israel declared itself a state, because it's on the other side of the green line, at the top of the hill. But there's no wall, there's no border, you can just walk up to the top of the hill and over the other side and you're inside Israel. At least for now. So they've been able to have really good relationships with the Israeli town of Sur Hadassah. They come down into the village and buy their fruits and vegetables. It's all organic. It's all grown in the historic old-fashioned way. They get their cars repaired there because it's cheaper to have a Palestinian work in your car than it is for an Israeli. Now here's the settlement of Bitar Eli, this blue area. See how close it comes to the village? It literally goes right behind the school. This is slotted for, currently it has 60,000 people. Wadi Fuqin is 1,200 people. And this light blue area, which is what's currently under construction, the dark blue was already under construction, or already finished when this was made, this map. But the light blue is now currently under construction, and that'll expand this to 100,000 people. Now see, all this rest of this blue are also Israeli settlements, and this will create that settlement block of Gush Etzion, which is another big settlement down here. Now see where the root of the wall goes, that purple, and then it connects to the red. This is the checkpoint. Here's the main road. This is Major Street. There's the main checkpoint I showed you. And this has already all been constructed. It would be very easy for Israel in any kind of negotiation to say, well, you know, we've got all these Jews living in this area, and the wall is kind of already there, let's just make the wall the border, and we'll absorb that entire area to become part of Israel. So the wall is being constructed very strategically. In addition, Bethlehem sits under a huge water aquifer. The Palestinians are not allowed to drill into that aquifer. We have to buy our water from the Israeli government at 3 times the price of what the Israelis pay. In addition, they only turn the water on every 2 weeks. So everybody has to have a big tank on the roof of their house to store their water and hope you don't run out. I'm lucky, I'm only one person with the same size tank as my neighbors who have 7 people. So, you know, many times they're like, oh, can we borrow some water? And you stockpile your water because often they'll turn the water off altogether and you can go, it's over when last summer, 40 days without water. So you keep sticking to this 40 number. Next. This is what the hill used to look like in Wadi Fuqin. Next. This is what it looks like now. Actually, it doesn't even look like that now because that's all been completed and they've expanded even farther into the village, towards the village. Next. In addition to just taking the land and building on it, which again prevents, if you've got all this concrete, the rainwater, when it does rain, can't be absorbed into the land and filter down into that aquifer. There are 11 freshwater springs in the village of Wadi Bukim, 7 of which have already been ruined. Either dried up because the water can't make it that far, or they've been polluted for a variety of reasons, and this is one of the ways. The construction materials run down the hill. It's basically mud and concrete, so it dries up and it covers the agricultural fields. They can't do anything with it. You can't even chip it out. And that's one of the ways that some of these springs have been destroyed. Next. Probably, yeah. Next. Next. See how much it just comes down the hill and keeps going. Next. Next. You might recognize some couple of those folks. That's Michael Yoshi and Atam Nasra on the right. He's the director of our community development project, and Mazen, who's our beekeeper for the project. And you can see how beautiful the valley is. This is, the agricultural land is down in this valley, goes downhill this direction. There's only one road in and out of the village at the northern end, or the upper end of the valley. But this is all going to be built on. Next. I must be talking about the Beehive Project. We started the community development project with the Beehive Project. And you'll notice we marked them with red paint. When the beehives in the village were stolen, honey is a very high marketable item. It's about $40 for about a liter of honey, because people put it in a cup and they eat it for the health benefits. They eat it with a spoon right out of the cup. It's a lot of honey. Plus, it's a way to make money where you don't have to worry about getting to a job. The bees can fly over the checkpoints and bring the money back to you. So that was one of the reasons that we started with the Beehive Project at their recommendation. And other people in the village have beehives, and they were all stolen, all of them, with the exception of the ones that we had marked in red with UNCWF for Wadi Bukim. And again, just to show that having something written in English on the top of something is like hands off, that belongs to an international, we're not going to take that. So when last spring, in March, we had a volunteer team from California here go to the village. A man's olive trees had been uprooted. So this volunteer team went, they bought 20 new trees, and we planted these new trees on his land. He prepared the land for us, and we were literally between here and a settlement house. That's how close we were. They were looking out their windows at us. And we were singing things like "We Shall Overcome" and all this how we're planting these trees and laughing and having a great time, taking lots of pictures and taking pictures of them. And we decided that we would mark the trees, tie ribbons around. They're just little saplings. Tie ribbons around them and put Mary Smith. This tree belongs to Mary Smith. This tree belongs to Janet Lewis. This tree belongs to, you know. So they'll think twice about uprooting those trees again. So the international presence is extremely important to protect not only the property but the Palestinians themselves, because they come under attack by the settlers with machine guns that come down into the village and threaten the farmers with their machine guns. It's just a horror story. Next. 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 Not sure I want to even talk about this part, but it's, let me say one more thing about Wadi Bukim. I was hoping I had a picture of it in this one, but we've moved on to a different village. The sewage from the sewage treatment plant, there are 3 pipes that look directly over the agricultural land of the village. And about once a week, those pipes would be opened and the raw sewage would flood the field. Exactly. So not only did it burn, and we would run down the hill and flood some of the farmers' land. It didn't make it all the way across the valley, but not only did those farmers lose their land, nothing will grow there now. But the reputation of the produce from Wadi Fakine, they've lost their reputation. It was like, oh, you're from Wadi Fakine? Oh yeah, I want to buy your stuff, in Bethlehem, in the Bethlehem market. Now it's like, ooh, you're from Wadi Fakine? Ooh, no, I don't want to buy it. So they go somewhere else. So even the good produce is not saleable anymore. I'm not quite sure why this is in there until maybe the next picture will tell. This is the church in Zabande, the Greek Catholic Church. Next. Oh, probably just to show some of our partners. This is one of our partner organizations. We work ecumenically and interfaith in the region. We don't have a Methodist church. So we work with the indigenous churches, the 13 indigenous churches and the historic churches, and also with the Muslim and Jewish community, particularly on the areas of peace with justice. This is a Jewish woman here, right here in the shirt, and obviously this is a Muslim woman. This organization called Cindiana of Galilee, some of you may have heard of their olive oil because someone in this conference actually imports it and sells it here. Was started by Jewish women for Palestinian women, Arab women inside Israel, citizens of Israel, to help get them added income, to help them give them job skills, etc. So we partner with this organization because it is an interfaith organization as well. Next is the volunteer team visiting them. Next, so you can see they make baskets, and we now have the people, we had 3 trainers from Cindiana in the north. We got $5,000 from an Anglican female priest in the UK who donated $5,000 to start up so that we could bring 3 people from Cindiana down to Wadi Fakine and put them up in a hotel and transport them back and forth to the village, etc. Because it was winter and it was, people don't have enough blankets, they'll sleep on the floor so you can have their beds, that kind of thing. We didn't want to do that, so we just put them in a hotel. And that's cheap in Bethlehem, so it's like $25 a night. And then they trained the women on how to do the basket weaving, so that, because they already have a market in the tourist market in Bethlehem where they can sell their baskets. Go ahead, you can keep going. These are just some volunteer mission pictures. This happens to be at Mar Elias, again in the village of Zabande. This is all completed now. Next. This became the new kindergarten. You can see the little slide there. Next. Okay, so this is how we are involved in the region as the United Methodist Church. Unfortunately, I don't have an update because I don't have my real flash drive. To show you what has been done since then, as far as joining forces with other Methodist churches. As I mentioned, we work ecumenically and interfaith. We have what are called advanced projects. The community development project is an advance. I'm an advance. All missionaries have an advance number. This is so that people can make direct donations through the advance, and 100% of their donation goes to the project. They don't keep anything back for administrative costs. We also have what we call partner projects, and this is where we work with the Muslim and Jewish community and some other Christian organizations because we believe in the work that they're doing and we want to support that work, either through finance or through volunteers or through just promoting their work when we send out articles, etc. I mentioned Wadi Fakine, volunteers and mission trips. One of the things that we have already passed many years ago in General Conference is how to do responsible tours to the Holy Land. It's actually I have a copy. It's one of the resolutions that was passed. We've had several on the Holy Land. And the Global Ministries just printed an advocacy packet, and unfortunately I only have one left, but you can get the contact information. This is a really nice booklet. It's called Working for a Just and Lasting Peace in Israel and Palestine. What you should know, how you can help. Advocacy packet for use in local congregations. And then the contact information of where to get these booklets. They're free. And you can use them as in a study in the church. It's got our resolutions that have already been passed on the issues. It's got action, ways to take action, either through divestment, through boycotts, the website lists, all kinds of reading lists, organizations who are involved in the region. It's just a really good advocacy booklet to have. And if anybody's interested, I'll let you write down where to get more copies. GDGM can send you some. Next. This might be close to the end. Yeah, these are some of the organizations that we work with. As I mentioned, Jewish organization B'Tselem is a human rights organization. And I also encourage you, if you want to learn more, to there's several really good Jewish organizations here in the United States that are doing excellent advocacy work on the issue of Israel and Palestine. Because they, even as Jews, they don't like what's going on over there. They say this is not Judaism, the love of neighbor that we are taught, in all of our religions. So Jewish Voice for Peace is probably one of the best in the nation. They're the ones who started the idea of boycott, divestment, and sanctions in this country. They promoted it right off the bat. We can't deal with sanctions, that's a governmental thing, but we can do boycott and divestment. Boycotting things like SodaStream, which I guess is very popular in this area. We have some of those flyers in here. Hang that up somewhere. SodaStream manufacturing plant is in the settlement of Ma'ale Adumim. If the settlement is illegal, the products coming out of that settlement are illegal. That's why SodaStream's on the boycott list. Next, we'll probably just contact information. I tell people that everybody can do something, and the first thing that everybody can do is to pray. We have a saying in Jerusalem. In Arabic, when you say, "Oh, I'm going to the church," you don't say, "I'm going to the church to pray." You say, "I'm going to the church to call on God," or call the name of God. And they have a saying that when you call on God from the holy city of Jerusalem or Bethlehem, it's a local call. So they believe very strongly in the power of prayer. Particularly the Christian community has always asked me, because people forget that this is where Christianity started. I was in London. We are now partnered after a lot of years of working towards this goal. Since we now have an actual Methodist office, it's located right at the checkpoint, the Bethlehem checkpoint. It's actually in the Bethlehem district, but on the Jerusalem side of the checkpoint. So it's kind of in this nebulous area. But it's located at Tantur Ecumenical Institute. And we rent 2 rooms there now. We got approval finally after a long process. We are now partnered with the General Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Church in Britain, and the World Methodist Council. So we are now a global office working as a Methodist denomination around the world on the issues of Israel and Palestine, which is really exciting. The office was dedicated in 2012, October 2012. And ever since then, we've been working very hard with our international partners, the South Africans, the Nigerians in particular, the Koreans, the Indians. England, of course, has lots of contacts in India that they send our way. They bring groups on pilgrimage there to encourage groups in particular who don't know that Christians even, there is such a thing as a Palestinian Christian, They think all Palestinians are Muslim terrorists. This is the media. This is what the media tells us. So encouraging them to worship with a local congregation on a Sunday morning, show your faces to them so that they know, that they exist. They just want people to know that they're there and they are struggling to stay there. The Christian population is only about 1.2% now. It's getting much smaller, and it continues to get smaller, and we don't want to see the Christian population gone completely, because then Israel, I mean, it would be bad enough that the place of the birth of our faith, there are no Christians left, but it would also give the Israeli government an excuse to make this conflict a religious conflict between the Jews and the Muslims, and not the political conflict that it really is. Next, I think this might be it. Yeah. Nope, the other way. Other way. We're going backwards. Anyway, I think it's just the contact information. Oh, is that a new slide? We saw that one already.
Same slide as before.
Oh, mistake.
But go a little more.
Yeah, there should, oh, here we go. This is a quote from Nelson Mandela that he made in 1997, only 3 years after the breakup of the apartheid system in South Africa, when he had his hands full trying to get South Africa back on track. And I've had this quote taped to my computer ever since 1997, thinking, maybe this will be the year, maybe this will be the year, maybe this will be the year. It's been a long wait, and it's still not the year. Right now, all hell has broken loose in the cities of the West Bank, Bethlehem included, with curfew being called, which means that nobody leaves their home for 24 hours a day, day after day after day, until they decide to lift the curfew. Could be weeks, it could be a couple of hours. If there's curfew, not only do you not leave your home, you don't go out on the balcony to hang your clothes on the clothesline or you'll be shot. You don't walk past a doorway or a window or you'll be shot at. You can't, if someone dies from the stress, you can't get them out to bury them. You have to put them in a room and close the door and wait until they lift curfew. Curfew is serious business. I mean, people die during curfew. Plus, the tanks, the water tanks on the roof I was telling you about, those become the first place that the snipers shoot at. So that when people realize their water is leaking out and you can't live without water, they'll take the chance to go up on the roof to plug up the holes, and then they get shot. So it's very intentional. The number one strategy in any conflict is to control the water. And right now it's under curfew. Wadi Fakina is under curfew. The soldiers have come in. They didn't bring the tanks yet, but they're in Bethlehem, and they're doing what they call house-to-house searches. What this means is, instead of breaking in through the door of your house, they put an explosive in the wall of the side of your house and blow a big hole in the side of your house, and then they go in and tear your house apart. I mean, breaking everything. Traumatizing. The average lifespan used to be 100 years old. Now for the Palestinian average male, it's 67. That's a huge difference in just a matter of like 30 years. That's not even one generation. Because the stress levels are so high. The drinking water is bad. I mean, everything is compounded on them. So the sooner we can encourage the Israeli government to stop this occupation and force them to be in compliance with international law and Geneva conventions, then the sooner we can see a change in the region and have some basic human rights for the Palestinians. Just as a closing comment, $8.2 million per day in U.S. tax dollars is going to military aid to Israel. $8.2 million a day. And I come to this country after having tear gas in my apartment and knowing that tear gas is coming from Philadelphia. And I come back here and I see homeless people. And it's a shock to me. Because first of all, we don't have homeless people over there. And second of all, it's like, how can a country with so much money still have homeless people? Why are we not taking care of our own? So, let's divest from our own government and stop paying those taxes. Anyway, all right, I'll stop here, and if you have any questions, or we can have a discussion about whatever you want. Thank you. My questions are- I'll go ahead and pass this around, you can take a look at this. That's unfortunately been my last copy, but if anybody wants to order some more, it might be a good thing to, do you all have like adult Sunday school classes or anything here? They have study guides listed in here, so you can consider using one of the study guides as a short course during the, or have a separate course. You know, they have one that's supposed to be like 3 evenings to cover certain material, that kind of thing.
So you know the honey beehives, I was just wondering why some of them are marked red and not all of them.
Because our beekeeper keeps our bees, but he also has his own bees.
Oh, really? Is that why? And his own were not marked red?
Yeah, his weren't marked, yeah. His got stolen.
I could have just put a heart on it.
Yeah. We should have marked his.
Something, or,
But, then it would have, because we keep the honey separate, the money from the sale of that honey goes to the project, so, yeah. He gets a portion of it.
so all his are still.
Oh, yeah, exactly, and it was right before the harvest time, yeah. The best harvest is in the spring, it rains during the winter and all the flowers come out. So the best harvest is in the springtime, and that's when they aim at the harvest.
It's cute what you said about the bees can go all over and
Yeah.
get where the flowers are and pollinate.
Yeah.
And make that honey over here.
Any questions, any comments, any?
So now you've lived in Palestine how long?
20 years, since
Really?
1991.
So, is there, are there other GBGM missionaries now?
Yes, Alex and Brenda are still there, the 2 other people that I showed you. And we have a mission intern there, her name is Grace Killian, she's from Pennsylvania, working in the West Bank. And Reverend Kristen Brown, who's from Oklahoma, she's working in the Methodist office. And they're working on finding a replacement for me because I just moved back to the States in March, the end of March, when I started my itineration. I haven't actually stopped moving yet, but eventually, Monday, I'll get to actually go to Fredericksburg, where I'll be living in Virginia, and have about 10 days there before I head out again. Let's see, who else is there? That's pretty much it. We have what we call individual volunteers in mission who come. The problem is the visas. You can get a 3-month tourist visa or visitor's visa as soon as you get off the plane, unless you've been up to good somewhere else. So that allows you to stay for 3 months. If you leave the country and come back maybe a week later, they might let you back in and give you a 3-month visa. I was there for the first 15 years with a 3-month visa.
Wow.
Because I told them that I did consulting work at a school in the Galilee, which is inside Israel, which is actually what I did when I first went over. And I thought, well, as long as it's working, I'm sticking to it. So even after 97, when I actually moved to Bethlehem, started working in the West Bank, that's what they have on their computer. That's what I'll continue to say. People at the school know that to verify that if they actually call, say, yeah, she works there. She lives on the campus, the whole business. Which, I still continue to work with them, even, just so it wouldn't be a total lie, because they will catch you if you completely lie. But then I got caught. The longest visa you can get is for 1 year. Some visas are renewable, like the clergy visa. Alex and Christian both have clergy visas. I'm not ordained, so I don't have a clergy visa. That's good for 1 year, renewable for indefinitely, but you have to be sponsored by one of the historic churches that were around before Israel was created.
Oh.
It's a baby country. I had to get a work visa because the volunteer visas are only good for 1 year, renewable for only 1 more year, and I knew I wanted to be in the country longer. So I got a sponsor, an archbishop sponsored me for a work visa. This is because I was doing consulting at his school in the gallery. And so that's for 1 year, renewable for 5 years. So I've known for the last 5 years that this would be my end time. I was originally going to ask for a different placement in another country for the last 3 years of till I can retire. But then my sister died last year, so I decided, nah, I might as well move back to the States. Be closer to my own family.
We don't hear much about the statehood.
About,
Statehood, Palestinian.
well,
It came up and then all of a sudden it was set under the conference.
well, and that term state has very serious legal implications. Israel declared itself a state in 1948. It was, and then eventually the UN recognized it, et cetera, et cetera. So it became a state, a nation state. Palestine was recently recognized a year ago last fall now, as a non-member, non-voting state of Palestine in the United Nations. What does that word state mean exactly for Palestine? Where is Palestine? Is those little polka dots they've got left? How do you make a state on that? You can't even get from one polka dot to the other, As the Palestinians say, well, it's like Swiss cheese, where Israel got the cheese and we got the holes. If it's recognized as a political state, a nation state, it has the right to go to the International Criminal Court and hold Israel for war crimes, which it could very easily do because what it's doing are war crimes. But nobody's taken them to court. Nobody will hold them responsible. This is a problem. The United States certainly won't do it. We veto practically everything that goes through the United Nations in favor of the Palestinians and their human rights is vetoed by the United Nations, or by the United States and the Marshall Islands, because they get 100% of their budget from the United States. So whatever the United States does, they do. That's part of the negotiation process. Obviously, in Arafat's time, early on, the PLO wanted all of Palestine back. And then he finally came to the realization that that's just not even an option anymore. So during Clinton's time as president, if you recall with Rabin, the handshake on the White House lawn, the famous handshake, he acknowledged Israel on everything except the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And he didn't talk about the Golan Heights, that's a Syrian issue. But basically, they went back to the original map. And Rabin was willing to do that. He talked about the two-state solution, which of creating a Palestine on Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which makes up only 24% of that big green area in that one map. And keep in mind, it's a very small country. It's a 5-hour drive from the tip of the north to the south, and an hour and a half from the east to the west. It's really small. That's, barring checkpoints, of course. So it's a very small, piece of property that they're talking about. So when you have 600 checkpoints in a little tiny area like that, we joke, we say, well, why buy a fancy car because you can't ever get out of third gear before you hit a checkpoint, or a roadblock or something. So the idea of statehood for the Palestinians, where would that be? There are always two very important words whenever talking about a Palestinian state: viable and contiguous. You cannot have a viable state if you can't get from one part of your state to the other. It has to be contiguous. You can't have a contiguous state if you've got bypass roads in the way. The discussion of Jerusalem was purposely pushed to the end of the Oslo discussions and the end of the Oslo process because Israel will never give up Jerusalem. It will never give up Jerusalem, which is why going back to the idea of keeping it a corpus separatum, a separate body, it's not Israeli, it's not Palestinian, it's not Jewish, it's not Muslim, it's not Christian, it's open city for everyone, will be the final solution. That's the only way this will ever get resolved. And Israel will never give that up without a fight, and a big fight. So that's going to be one of the problems. The talk in the region is that the next major war will be fought over the water issues. So that, well, two things. They want to secure oil for the United States and water for Israel. Those will be what the basis of the next major battle will be about. It won't be about the Palestinians, they'll just be the excuse. A lot of people, are saying, the two-state solution is just not even an option anymore, and I'm one of those, because you have so many of these Palestinian or Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and the whole infrastructure has changed throughout the West Bank, that that's not even a viable discussion anymore. So offering Palestinian citizenship to these Israelis would be one option. The way that 30% of the citizens of Israel are non-Jews, they're Palestinian refugees, they're internal refugees, what we call them. These are people who were able to remain in the country when Israel was created in 1948. Most of the Palestinians were shoved across the borders at gunpoint. Their towns and villages, over 500 towns and villages were destroyed to make them not have any place to return to, infiltrate across and go home. They just destroyed the towns and villages. And later, built Jewish cities on top of them. But it's increasing. Around 30% of the population of Israel are these, what Israel now calls Israeli Arabs. These are citizens of Israel. They will not use the P word and acknowledge that there was a Palestine. So they don't say that these are Palestinians, they say they're Arabs. There are 22 different Arab countries, On their ID cards, it doesn't say, if you're Jewish, you have a 01, and under nationality it says Israeli. If you're one of these Palestinian internal refugees, you get a 02, so you're literally a second-class citizen. And under nationality, they refuse to say Israeli, they were going to say Christian or Muslim, or Druze, or whatever. And they said, that's a religion, that's not a nationality,
Yeah.
So they said, okay, we'll put Arab. That's a language.
Yeah.
It's a culture, it's not a nationality. There are 22 other countries. So, but that's what they're stuck with. Now, the Palestinians living inside Israel, the preferred terminology is Palestinian citizen of Israel, not Israeli Arab.
Yeah. So they're Palestinian. So they let them say that they're Palestinian.
They say that they're
Oh, but
Palestinian.
they won't let them put it on there.
No. Palestinians have, the ones who are citizens of Israel are allowed to be elected into the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, but they're limited in the number of seats that they're allowed to have, which is much smaller than their population. Interestingly enough, Arafat always wanted a democratic state, not an Islamic state, which is why most of the Arab countries wouldn't support him, because they wanted him to have an Islamic state. And he said, no, we need a democracy here. So he made sure that on his cabinet, 25% of the people were Christian, even though their numbers were only about 2% at the time. So that they would be, it wouldn't get too Islamic in the voting and the processing and the passing of laws, etc. He said if we have 25% of the people on our cabinet, the decision makers who are Christian, it won't get to be an Islamic state and we'll have a true democracy. So, and now he's gone, so they're trying to, now it's getting a little more Islamic, but places like Nazareth and Bethlehem, it's not written down anywhere that this is a rule, but they have always had and almost predictably will always have Christian mayors. Even Bethlehem, where the population is about 60% Muslim now, no, it's more than that. Yeah, it's about 60% Muslim, 40% Christian. Beit Tzur down the hill is 80% Christian, 20% Muslim, and up the hill in Beit Jala, where I was living, is 60% Christian, 40% Muslim. It's the opposite of Bethlehem. That's called the Christian triangle. It's basically a straight line, but you just go down the hill.
Are there any physical characteristics among the Israelis and Palestine? I mean, do they?
What do you mean? Like, how do you tell
Do
them
they
apart?
look, yeah, I mean, what, like here, we're Chinese, we're Japanese, we're Hispanic, and so how are they different? I mean, when you see a group
Right.
of Israelis, a group of Palestine, could you tell what they are?
A lot of them you can,
You can.
by either their mannerisms or their facial features or their hair texture. But there's so many, and certainly it's a little harder with the foreigners. The foreign Jews who have moved there, because they've come from Australia, and United States, they're from everywhere. So they just look very Western. Yeah, I mean, we kept talking about that, and there's a gentleman from Korea one time, who was one of our guest speakers, and he said, people keep talking about, oh, this is happening in the West, this is happening in the West, and referring to the United States. The United States is east for me.
That's
If you look at the globe, it's to the east.
true.
That was pretty funny. It's generally the language. The Jews speak Hebrew, the Palestinians speak Arabic. The Israelis, there are 3 official languages of Israel: Arabic, English, and Hebrew. They are now trying to change the 3 official languages of Israel to Hebrew, English, and Russian. And getting rid of the Arabic altogether. The reason because they had so many, they advertise. They try to keep a Jewish majority, so they advertise all this beautiful housing in these lovely settlements and stuff to get the people from Ethiopia to come, the lost tribe. So we have Ethiopian Jews, and then the Russians certainly came in, especially during the time of the Soviet Union, escaping religious persecution in Russia. So, and they don't speak Hebrew typically. They serve in the military, but they have to have Russian commanders and the whole business. They don't speak Hebrew. Now, interestingly enough, there's a qualification that if you wanted to come to Israel and become a citizen of Israel, which you can do if you can prove that on your grandmother's side there's like 1 drop of Jewish blood, or a certain percentage, there's these qualifications, then you can become an immediate citizen practically as soon as you step off the plane.
Really?
So many of the Russians were coming in and using that as a jump off point to go somewhere else, that they passed this rule that said, no, if you're a citizen, you have to spend at least 5 years, and you have to serve in the military. And if you want dual citizenship, a lot of Americans and whatever come in, they want to keep their American passports. If they want to get Israeli citizenship, you have to spend at least 6 months a year in Israel. So a lot of these Russians now who were escaping the Soviet Union are now starting churches because they're Russian Orthodox, and They're Christians. We even had a guy, I was taking a group up to one of the villages in the northern West Bank, and we were held at a checkpoint for 5 hours, even when I had permission that we were allowed to go through, and from the army. And they said, oh, you know, they're just delaying, hoping we'll get bored and go away. 5 hours later, they got fed up with us, so they said, sorry, checkpoint's closed, you have to leave. You probably go there for Obama anyway. You know. So I called the priest, and I said, all right, we're at the northern crossing. Should we come to the east or the west? And they said, go down to the Jordan Valley. I'll send a couple vans from the village to pick you up. Come up through the Tyser checkpoint, and I said, that checkpoint's been closed for 5 years. I missed your ordination because they wouldn't let me through. And he goes, yes, I know. They won't even let our priests through, but just try it. And if they won't let you through, the van drivers know how to get around it. So much for security. So sure enough, we load these people onto these vans. We drive up to this checkpoint. Out comes this 18-year-old blonde, blue-eyed Russian kid, and he says, "Where are you going?" You know, we're obviously not settlers going to the settlement. And I said, "We're going to the church in Zabape." "You're going to the church?" And I said, "Yes." And he reaches in his Israeli uniform and pulls out a cross around his neck, and he said, "Have a good time." And he let us through. It was shocking.
Praise the Lord.
So so now they're starting to start churches in Israel, and that really makes the government angry because they don't want Christians there. They want the Christians out. You know?
Oh. They're letting the Russians in.
Sorry?
But they're letting the Russians.
And now the Russians are starting
Who
their
are
own
Christians.
churches, even though they said they came in saying they were Jewish. So now they're starting churches, and that's just really not good for the Israeli government. So, yeah, it's a very, very, very complex
They
situation.
need more Christians in there.
Hmm?
They need more Christians from all over all the countries.
Well, that would be good,
Yeah.
just to have an international presence and defray some of the violence.
Right.
Well, should we kind of wrap up with a closing prayer and invite you to make a contribution to Cal Nevada conference if you'd like to, because the check, if you're gonna write a check, is made to the conference, and then you note it's for the Mission Itineration Fund, and you can put Janet's name.
Oh, I have an envelope
Oh,
for
okay.
you. It tells you how to make out checks or something.
Yeah. Well, Howard
That's
said
from
on the
Howard.
email.
Yeah. No, this is, oh, he sent you one?
He sent me on an email, Cal Nevada.
Oh, okay, no,
Conference.
he made these for you, so that's for you.
So we can mail it in.
Right.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
we write it to the
Good.
church and we send
Right.
a check? Or you want separate?
Well, I don't know, some people may give cash too, so
Oh.
I don't know. Figure it out.
Well, thanks for your attention
Sure,
anyway.
sure.
I know it's
Yeah,
kind of a long
it's
evening,
good.
but
Thank you.
it's good to be back and
Wow.
share a meal. Now, in the Palestinian culture, I don't know how it is in the Chinese culture, but in the Palestinian culture, you only invite, if you're going to share a meal with someone, that means that they have now become a part of your family. So I must be a part of your family. That's why they're a little selective when who gets to eat at their house.
Someone like to offer us a departing closing prayer? Doesn't have to be long.
I can pray for us.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh, gracious and loving God, we thank you so much for this evening of learning and of opening of eyes, news, and challenges look before us. And just to share, even just for a brief moment, of the injustice and the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We also give you praise for the work and ministry of Janet in service for your people. All of these 20 years, we give you thanks for all of it, and all of your missionaries who are still there, and all of the justice workers who are there on the ground, day in and day out. Lord, help us always to be mindful, even in here in the United States, of all that we do and the things that we do unawares. Help us always. Thank you for this time together. And I ask that you would be with us